What are we going to do with these Blue Jays? My goodness, we've been in this pattern since 2-9, from 1-9 and 2-11. I mean, right from the beginning of the season.
I think it's getting close. I mean, this was a critical stretch for them, obviously. Playing Baltimore, then Boston, now New York, and they're 1-6 so far in this stretch. And I don't know if any moves will be made before the All-Star break, but I mean, unless they start playing a heck of a lot better really, really soon, then it looks like maybe the best course of action is to trade a couple of players and start building up the farm system. And you hate to say that because great fans have paid a lot of money to go see ball games, but at some point, I guess you got to be realistic about the situation. And realistically, this team right now is not good enough to be a playoff team. And can they get better? Sure, but you keep waiting for the offense to come around, and it's just not. It's just not doing it. And hopefully Aaron Sanchez coming back bolsters the rotation. Hopefully the Stroman situation isn't serious, and maybe Miguel Montero helps a little bit. But I mean, the key guys have to start hitting a lot better for this team to get anywhere back close to being a contender.
Dan, we were talking about that before. The fact that at what point do you kind of run the white flag up the pole? And we both know that in pro sports, things can change very, very quickly. And how long do you give it? How long do you give it? And what we don't know is what decision has been made behind the scenes and what kind of calls. I mean, fans, I always say this, the regular everyday fan would just have their jaw drop if they knew what kind of calls were made on a regular everyday basis to make inquiries about player A or player B. And when it gets out, it's a big deal. Oh, they called about so-and-so. Well, that happens all the time.
Right. I mean, that's the job of the general manager or the president in both cases. So I don't think decisions have been made yet, Jonesy. And the reason I say that is they just picked up Miguel Montero. And he's an older player. Not that he's the difference between first place and last place, but I don't think you go out and make that move unless you're kind of sort of still thinking that maybe you got a shot. But listen, over the next 6 days, 2 with the Yankees, 4 with the Astros, I think maybe during the All-Star break some decisions will be made. And you're right, calls are made all the time, and sometimes the decision is made on the basis of the call. When somebody calls you and says, hey, are you thinking of trading that guy, and here's what I'd offer you, then maybe that motivates you to go in a certain direction because you didn't expect to get that kind of an offer. But, it's one thing to be 8 games under, which is a lot. It's another thing to be as far out now as they are with as many teams between them and the wild card spot. So that's the problem, is how many teams they would have to jump over. And again, you don't want to rush to judgment. They've still got 80 games left in the season, but realistically, they'd have to go probably at least 50-30 in order to be a playoff team. Is it possible? Yeah, but is it likely? I don't think so at this time.
Talking baseball with play-by-play man Dan Shulman. There's no question that if that sort of thing was needed, you have a guy in place who's done it before. Mark Shapiro handled a winning Cleveland team and turned it into another winning Cleveland team. And you look at what he might have thought he had when he came in here and took over the Jays, and all of a sudden they became that playoff team that he might have had a different mindset. But he's been thinking about this all along, hasn't he?
Well, I think he knew it was kind of, before he officially took over is when Alex Anthopoulos made the trades and they became a contender, but they also became a much older team. So I think Mark has been, Mark's a really sharp guy. I mean, he's been very realistic from day one when he officially took over. He understood that the farm system had been depleted and that they had an older team. And sometimes there's no pretty way to transition from being an older team to a younger, better team. I mean, you got to take your lumps sometimes. So, Mark has done this before. He understands how to rebuild a team, and that doesn't mean it'll be all smooth sailing if and when they do it. But I'm sure that he's considering all kinds of things. They have all kinds of players in their 30s. They have several players whose contracts are up at the end of this year or next year. And again, with every loss they have, I think it becomes a little bit more about the future, a little bit less about the present. Not just yet, but I'm sure that they are considering right now internally, okay, if we start getting calls or if they're already getting calls, which players are they willing to deal? And I think the list might be a little bit broader than maybe fans realize or think it is.
Dan, the revenue side of things, we were talking about the fans. I mean, the Jays have had a nice thing going the last couple of years with the attendance. And, this year is one thing, but retaining your season seat base and selling tickets for next year is another thing. The business side of thing always creeps in. Where do they consider that in what's playing out this year?
I think they have to consider it, and it's a great point, and it's a good thing for the average fan to consider. But if you look at two options, so say one option is we don't want to alienate this amazing fan base that they have, so stay the course. But if staying the course is going to make them worse next year and the year after, is it worth it? At some point, probably a decision has to be made to say, okay, the window's closing and it's time. Listen, the Phillies did it, the Astros did it, the Cubs did it. To a certain extent, even the Yankees did it last year, although it worked out very well for them. So you make a great point. You're absolutely right. But sometimes I think, you can. It's the old thing. You can pay me now or you can pay me later kind of thing. And again, I'm not saying they're at this point yet, nor should they be. But if they're heading in that direction, sometimes the longer you wait to do this, the more painful it is.